Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. All right, welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast. I am here today with my good friend, Wally Olson. Wally, how are you?
Good.
Good. Today we are going to talk about how to sell cattle and how to buy cattle. We're going to get into some specifics of the mechanics. We're going to talk about some general principles. And then we really want to help people that are struggling with the mechanics of getting it done. So, Wally, let's jump right in.
Very good. Let's start. The only reason I see to sell cattle is when they're overvalued. Most people look at, we sell the calves in the fall and yada, yada, and sell your cold cows and stuff. You need to be looking at, being focused on, change your mindset to be focused on what's overvalued in your herd, and you sell it then, and you keep whatever's undervalued.
And how are you defining overvalued and undervalued, Wally? I know people should know the answer to this if they've listened to our podcast. But
overvalued, if you're in the stocker business, you do it on the value of gain. What's the difference between what you own and what you can buy? And if there's a high value of gain there, your cattle are overvalued to them. So you sell your cattle and buy other cattle. And
very good.
In the cow-calf business, it's relationships of whatever's in your inventory, And most of the time, a weaning heifer calf is undervalued to the bred cows in your cow herd. And the only time that doesn't really happen is if you're experiencing a drought. And so selling cattle, you've got many ways to sell them. You can sell them at the local sale barn. You can sell them on the video auctions. You can sell them in the country. And we're going to talk about selling them in the country now.
And are we talking about stockers or cows to start?
Stockers.
Okay.
Talking stockers right now. Be right honest with you, I don't try to sell a cow in the country because those tire-kicking people that buy cows, I just can't handle it, I can sell thousands of stocker or feeder cattle in the country, but not one cow. So you have to understand, one is everybody's terrified of pricing cattle, and pricing cattle is very easy. You've got to understand what you really have. And if you are, let's just take an example. If you're selling cattle around Buffalo, Wyoming, go to the Buffalo auction, sit there and see what they're selling for. And you price them off of that. For me in Oklahoma, I use the Oklahoma City market. And since I don't handle really number one cattle, what I do is average the number one cattle and the ones and twos together. And that's what I ask for them.
Very good. And let's real briefly, I know we've done this before, but let's explain number ones and the number 1-2s.
The number ones are it's set up on muscle scoring and frame size and by the USDA, and I don't hold much count for it. You got to realize the market report decisions are done in about 15 seconds. And if they're black, they're number ones. If they're colored, they're number ones and twos. And I'm being facetious there. So
yes, I understand. But it again, it's a rough measure of the quality potential of the calf, right?
Yes.
So to my mind, a 1-2, or what I call a 1.5, which is not correct terminology. It's like being partially pregnant, but the 1s and 2s can be upgraded a lot of time, right? With some nutritional help. So they have the potential to be a 1, but they're not quite there when they're going through the sale. Whereas like a number 3 type calf is more like a longhorn that's never going to be like
number
a black
one
or a red Angus steer. Yeah.
That's correct.
So the number 1s would be like a typical English type cross, right? And sometimes an English continental cross. But you're talking black Angus, red Angus, predominantly, maybe some Simmental in there, that sort of thing. And then you have the off-colored stuff like Charolais, which often are in that 1-2 crowd, right? They still have, this is where it's silly because the Charolais has plenty of muscling potential, but they don't grade as well. So they take a little bit of a knock. And then the number 3s would be like dairy crosses, longhorns, Corianis, that sort of thing, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Just so everybody understands.
So when you go to sell cattle, you got to understand, when you sell them in the country, you have no commissions. But you got other responsibilities you pick up. When you sell them on the video auction, you pay them a commission, but you don't have any trucking, and you turn a lot of the risk over to the video company, which is not bad.
Right. Now let's make a quick distinction, because sometimes we do sell in the country or at home without a video with a commissioned buyer.
Yes.
But you're talking like you advertise them yourself on Facebook or Craigslist or Ranch World Ads or what's the Texas newspaper? Cattle Range. You sell them through that and just deal directly. You are the broker, basically deal directly with the buyer yourself. Okay, good.
Or you find a order buyer that is working for someone and they pay the order buyer, So you need to understand, if you're going to take them to the sale barn, you need to understand how their system works. You need to personally know the manager, because he is working for you. You're paying the commissions. And so, find out how they do stuff so you can best benefit from that. And one thing you have to understand that when you go to the sale barn, there's more costs there than just the commissions. I mean, there's insurance and stuff, but also there's the freight getting there. And another thing that people don't measure and don't understand is the shrink that's involved. Like I tell people, if you're in the cattle business, one of the cheapest tools you can have is a scale. And a scale costs about $20,000. You can buy a very nice scale for that. And if you take your cattle and we have weighed cattle at the ranch, and then what they sold for at the sale barn. At the ranch, we give a 2% shrink, so we shrink them too. At the sale barn, they shrink 4%, and 4% shrink on a 500-pound calf is 20 pounds. And if you take that times 20 pounds times
current prices,
$5, that's $100. So in other words, 200 calves would pay for a scale.
And let's just hit this real quickly. We are recording this in October of 2025. Feeder cattle today have touched $380 on the October contract. We are in a price run-up like one we've never seen before, and it may keep running up. We don't know. But as you're saying, the value of each additional pound is very, very high.
Yes, it is. Like I said, the cost of marketing now is horrendous, and you need to understand that.
Good. Hey, let's get back to the sale barn thing for just a minute, because another comparison I'd like to know is you at your sale barn, you said 4% is what you typically see. What's the maximum you've seen? I think 8 to 10% is kind of a tie-in.
Yes, you can get up to 8 to 10% if you take them in the night before, so you got a good place to sell them in the sale.
Yep. Good. And again, some sale barns offer a pretty good deal where they have a good setup for water and feed in the pen. So sometimes taking them the night before, or even a couple days before, will be helpful to your way up. In other cases, it's terrible. You take them in the day before and all they do is shrink, and they've got about a 2-inch, water spigot they could get a tiny drink from, and they don't do very well. So that's a place where you want to work with your sale barn manager and try it out. You're going to have to decide what works for you. We generally are hundreds of miles from a sale barn out here. And so they're going to be pretty shrunk when they get off the truck. If they can gain weight back, that can be a really good thing. I'll just tell you, I have had cattle at Torrington that have been there for a couple of days that gained weight. I've had other groups at other barns that will remain nameless who just clearly didn't eat anything, didn't drink anything. They just shrank. So,
and the thing is, what you need to do is you need to have the cattle prepared. I mean,
correct.
You don't just strip them and ship them to the sale barn the night before. And if your cattle have been weaned, they're used to eating, and just a whole lot of different things. And if they're quiet and can handle the stress and stuff.
Yep, very good. Struggling to break into the tight-knit world of ranching? Connect, compete, and grow with our new networking platform. Real ranchers, real insights, real opportunities. Visit ranching.fyi and click forums. Okay. So we talked about selling in the country. We talked about selling in the sale barn. Let's go back a minute if we're thinking like a 2% shrink in the country, that's fine. And maybe we're jumping over, but what do you see as the range of total costs of selling at the sale barn?
Well, one thing
And I know it
is
varies.
you have the freight to get them there, and then you have the commissions and the other stuff they add on, insurance and vet inspection fees and different things. And like I said, the shrink is the big thing, especially now. So,
okay, so I've seen that number range up to 20% of the gross proceeds. Is that similar to what you see? I assume you see a lower number just because you're so much closer to the sale barn.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Do you see a normal there? Is 10 to 15% in your normal range?
I hate to be this way. I buy them in the sale barn. I sell them in the country. I really
much.
I don't know. Like I said, I haven't sold that many calves in the country or in the sale barn. Another thing you need to be, if you're going to sell them in the sale barn, you need to be sure that you have visited with the sale barn manager. So, you can be watching the market and all of a sudden, 1 week cattle are higher than the Dickens, and stuff. Well, you need to make sure that those same buyers are going to be there the next week. Because if they don't show up, you can get sadly surprised.
And I want to reinforce this point. We spend a lot of time through the year raising these animals, right? And if I'm shipping a potload right now at, somewhere in the $4 to $5 range per pound, right? We're talking $200,000 to $250,000. It behooves me as the owner to go sit at the sale. We've talked about this before. I want every additional bid I can get, right? If it's another 2.5 cents per pound, I kind of want that in my operation, not in someone else's. And I don't mean to be greedy, but I think having a relationship with the auctioneer or the auction owner and the sale barn, and then, do your work, go show up, like finish that deal out strong so that you get the most you can out of that particular group of calves.
I know that's one thing my dear old dad always said, whenever you sell animals, you make sure you're sitting on the seats.
Yep. And it helps if you've got cute kids that people can feel sorry, thin, cute, dirty children that people can feel sorry for, that they know aren't going to get fed if we don't get the last 5 cents, right? But also that there's a great time there to be able to answer questions. A lot of times, somebody will say, hey, are these vaccinated? Or what were they vaccinated with mid-auction? They probably don't do that at Joplin, but I know they do that at auctions around here. And if you're there, you can answer that question. You can talk to people eye to eye. They can kind of feel you up and see if you feel like an honest person. You feel like somebody they want to, do business with through the auction barn.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Let's move on to selling them on the video auction. That's relatively simple. I mean, you have a representative and they come out and film the cattle. You set the rules that you're going to play by when you fill out the contract. And it's pretty straightforward, and you sell them. And for somebody that's 200 miles from sale barn, it's a pretty good option. And you put your cattle in front of, I don't know about thousands of buyers, but gobs of buyers.
And on the big auctions, whether it's Western or Superior or Cattle Country or Northern, you're putting them in front of big buyers, right? People that are serious about buying a lot of cattle. So
yes, that's correct.
And that to me is a wonderful way to get a great price. And the buyer may not come from your local neighborhood. He may be from 500 miles away, but he's willing to pay the shipping for quality calves.
That's correct.
Good. One thing I get a lot of questions about from people, Wally, people are very uncomfortable if they've never done it before guessing the weight. So, for example, we sell calves for fall delivery or even late summer delivery a few months before the delivery time. I've found that people are very uncomfortable with projecting the weight. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Well, the big thing is base it off of last year's weight and then adjust it. If you're in a drought or if it's a really good year, you may want to adjust it. And one thing I would rely on, that's why you're paying that rep. That rep should be capable of helping you there.
Yeah, the one thing I would advise, reps are often a little optimistic and they give you there's a 50-pound, like if you use Superior, and this isn't true on every auction video, but generally there's about a 50-pound, variance allowed, right? You can be 50 pounds over, 50 pounds under. You're still within contract spec. I would almost always shoot a little low because I would rather be a little overweight than underweight. And again, sometimes my rep, I don't know if they're filling up your tires or if they're just optimistic like all of us are, but if they think those calves might weigh 475, are going to weigh 475, I might put them in at 450. And you'll have to get a feel for that and where you're at.
That's correct. Another thing you need to do is take the time and develop an eye for cattle.
Agreed.
You just go spend some time on education. We're terrible about not wanting to be educated,
Let's talk a little about contract details also. Are there contract details that you particularly like as a buyer or as a seller?
Well, let's just talk through a contract. We're selling cattle in the country, and the first thing you do is you describe the cattle, what they really are. Then you need to come up with the price. And the way you come up with the price, like I said, just go to your local auction and figure it out and just sit there. There's no rocket science involved in it. You just figure it out and stuff. And like I said, I get along very good since I'm just selling cattle most of the time, 3-colored cattle. I get along very good at taking the price of number one and the price of 1.5 and averaging it together. And like right now, we're getting ready to start selling some calves that we've started that are weighing in the mid-5s. We're going to price them at number ones because the value of weaning is very high right now. So, we just need to do that. And then the next thing you need to do is understand what are your weighing conditions. At the ranch, we gave a 2% shrink. Well, it's getting tougher to get a 2%. It's going to go to 3%. And if you're comparing a 3% shrink on the ground with a 2% shrink on the truck, you're better off having the 2% shrink on the truck, depending on how far you got to haul the calves.
And depending a little on your stockmanship ability, right?
That's correct.
And your
yes.
calves' ability to handle stress.
Yep. And
maybe on temperature?
And temperature, just everything.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the next thing you need to do is understand the slide. And what the slide is a value that if your calves come in over, depending on if you just got a one-way or a two-way slide. A one-way slide is if they come in heavier than you sold them for, there's a penalty put on the price. And basically, if you're selling, let's just say a 500-pound calf and you've got a 10-cent slide, and they come in 50 pounds over, so instead of weighing 500, they weigh 550, the price is, it takes the 10 cents times the 50 pounds comes to $5. So instead of getting $5 a pound, you're going to get $4.95 for the calf. So,
have you ever seen a case where being in the slide, meaning being, let's say, 25 pounds overweight, hurts the seller?
And the only time it hurts the seller is depending on your cost of production.
Okay.
It depends on if you're just in a pasture situation or you're in a ranch situation. You want to always be in the slide, in my opinion. But if you're in a grow yard, and where this becomes very evident is we were in a grow yard dealing in cutting bulls, and it was costing us about $5 a day to be there, and we needed to get them things moved because our cost of production was higher than the
value of gain.
Yeah. So
yeah. Good. Okay. But a general rule, if we're operating on a ranch on grass, a general rule is we always want to be in the slide. And I mentioned earlier that I always like to shoot my weight a little low. I always want to be in spec, right? I want to be within that 50 pounds if that's what's allowed on the contract. But I'd like to be on the plus side of that, not the bottom side.
Correct.
Okay.
And also just like for my wife and I, if our cattle came in underweight, it was really hard on us. So we would make sure we didn't ever come in underweight.
Right.
And the only other thing you need to understand is the weight stop, depending on, and what that is if you sell your 500-pound calves, and if they come in 50 pounds over, or you put in a 50-pound weight stop. So if they weigh 555 pounds, you give away the 5 pounds over the 550, and that's just part of it.
When we talk about these contract terms, sometimes I think it's important to give the reminder that we should be thinking from our customer's perspective. What I would like, we want to be fair, but what I would like more than anything is, especially if it's like a video auction where you have people bidding against each other, I want to make those calves very attractive. One of the reasons I don't like a two-way slide is because it feels to me like it punishes the buyer if I underperform. And so I'm a fan of both a way stop and a one-way slide for the reason that it puts the pressure on me to deliver what I say I'm going to deliver. And hopefully my idea is that it makes those calves more attractive to any potential buyers. Because again, one or two additional buyers at an auction, whether it's an in-person auction or a video auction, can have a pretty significant impact on the total amount of money we make.
That is correct.
It's easy to get greedy on these things. I think be very cautious to think like a buyer. If you were the buyer, what would you want? What would you want to do? How would you want that vendor to treat you?
And two things, to me is if you got to run your business overloading a truck or cheating them in the slide, you need to restructure your business.
Good.
So we talked enough about selling cattle?
No. Let's cover one more thing. Let's talk about contracting real quickly, and then we'll move over to buying. We get a lot of questions from people that are interested in sell-by marketing about, if you sell your calves on a summer video, for example, and deliver them in the fall, does that violate all the rules of sell-by? What do you do? How do you handle that? This year's been a great example because our market is still rising through the fall. So if you sold calves in July, like we did, you now are having to buy back in a much higher market. So let's talk a little about that.
In theory, you are breaking, one of the rules of sell-by marketing. You buy and sell on the same market, but you need to know and understand yourself. And, the market has went up. And so you just discover what's the most undervalued animal and buy it and go again. That's just like a seasonal grazer. And one reason Bud Williams was so adamant on sell and buy them right back, one is the market. The other is we're so poor of inventory management of our money that, and if you got $1 million sitting in the bank account, it's pretty easy to go buy $100,000 pickup.
Okay, and so again, just to clarify that, if we sell in July for, let's say, delivery in August to November, when it comes time to buy back, we're just going to use a virgin buy. If we're buying back a couple months later and the market's different. This year is the perfect example. The market is up quite a bit. Again, it's at it hit 380 today. So we just deal with today and take that for what it is, right? Now, the other option that we visited quickly, and this will help us transition into selling, which I think we're going to have to cover next week because we've gone a little long here, is you could buy back on the same video auction, right? And that requires a deposit, but it does not require the full payment. So you could structure those so that you sold for November delivery and then bought back for November delivery also, right?
And you control the cattle.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's wrap up here. So we've talked about selling today. We're going to come back next week and talk about buying. And we will take a week-long break here, and then we will come back to talk more about that. Wally, thank you so much for joining me today. Couple of quick things I want to mention. You'd host a market pulse on the ranching.fyi website.
Every Monday morning.
Every Monday at 6:30 Mountain. I want to make sure people understand you and I have visited a lot about buying and selling cattle and sell-by marketing, both with stockers and with breeding stock in our Ranch Right webinar. We have that webinar every third Thursday of the month. We take February off. We do that 11 months of the year, and those are available on the Ranch Right YouTube channel. And if you would join our YouTube channel and subscribe there, that would be great. We've done a number of other episodes on the Ranchonomics podcast where we've talked about sell-by. So if people haven't heard those, they should go back and listen to those if they want to hear more of the basics. Anything else?
One thing is to me, marketing can completely transform people's lives, in my humble opinion.
Yep.
I have a number of people that are whining about how much taxes they've got to pay. Taxes have moved up to the third cost in their business, and on and on and on, which is a good deal and stuff. So,
Means you're making money, according to the IRS.
And with ranching.fyi and the marketing sim classes that is offered there, it's well worth to take the time to go to them. Matter of fact, you need to go to 2 of them. There's a number of people having sell-by marketing classes. Go to one, please.
Get somebody's. Yep.
Get somebody.
Tina and Richard or Doug or ranching.fyi. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Sounds good. Let's talk next week. Wally, thank you so much. Appreciate your visit today. We'll talk. Thank you for tuning into the Ranchnomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.